Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. I am here with the amazing Sean Evers. Sean is the head of UK sales and service at Funding Circle UK. One of our favourite people in the fintech finance world. We've worked together for a long time, and I'm excited to have you here today with me, Sean. Thank you very much for joining me.
No problem at all. I think you've definitely oversold my introduction, but I'll definitely take it. So good to be here and looking forward to our chat.
Take it. It's all about positivity. Let's put it that way. No, it's great to have you here, and I know that our audience will take a lot from the conversation that we have today. And we're going to focus in a little bit on looking at pipeline within sales. We'll talk all things sales and revenue growth, I'm sure, because that's the world that you live in. And obviously, Funding Circle's had an amazing journey of growth since you've been in the team. So we'll talk pretty broadly, but we're going to focus to start with on the way that we view pipeline, because obviously there's been a lot of change in that over the last 12 months or so. So maybe we could start just with before we get into that, just with a 1 minute, who is Sean, who is Funding Circle? Just give us an overview so everyone knows who you are.
Sure. So as you introduced me, my name's Sean Evers. I'm the head of sales and service in the UK for Funding Circle. Funding Circle is really an online lending platform for small businesses. Obviously, we have been around for about 10 years, hyper growth company, have over 600 employees, and we trade across the UK and the US predominantly, and we do a bit in Central Europe, but that's more around like partnering with third-party lenders and things like that. Last year, we helped 15,000 businesses in 2020 secure funding for their businesses. We've been accredited on the government scheme, so we do CBILS and BIBLS loans. But yeah, it's been a super interesting time to be in fintech during this pandemic.
And a title of head of sales and service, that feels really big to me. That must draw you around a fair bit, I'd imagine.
It's definitely keeps me busy, so to speak. So at Funding Circle, we have a couple of sales channels. So we have direct sales where people apply online directly to us, and then we work with financial intermediaries like brokers, accountants, banks that refer clients in for funding. And I guess the service part is more around investor support. So we have a retail product, so people like you and I and the listeners could invest in loans where they invest their money and get a yield and return for that. And I look after that part of the organisation. Okay,
brilliant. And how many are in your team, Sean? Just give us an idea of the scope of things.
Yeah, about 100 FTE in total, just under around 98.
Amazing. So when we look at pipeline, you must have a pretty big pipeline.
Yeah, it's got different.
You can't say no to that, just in case your manager's watching.
Yeah, but we very much focus on pipeline and top of the funnel, and as it works its way through the funnel, different stages and the probability of that. So on average, we probably have somewhere around about 1,000 opportunities in a pipeline at any one time.
And how does one person keep an eye on that? Because in my experience, and tell me if you feel differently from your conversations, I think pipeline management, reporting, understanding is a bit of a black box, isn't it? People look at it in different ways. The people that tell me they understand it, I'm sure at least half don't in all reality. So how do you look at pipeline management in your business?
I think it's a really good question, right? Because everyone will do different things. But I think with the tech stacks that people have now, it's really important. And also to have a very clear view of how things progress through stages and the likely probability of those as they get to each stage. And what you really want, Owen, is a really heavy top of the funnel with a really good mix of small deals to large deals. And then obviously, as you think about focusing, whether it's a quarterly forecast or a monthly forecast, you're thinking about actually, have I got enough pipeline to actually achieve that number? And obviously then you're getting into the deals and the mechanics of, sales methodologies. People use like BANT on transactional stuff, right the way up to Medic on more enterprise kind of sales. So for me, it's about how do you have a process where you have real confidence on your ability to deliver on the numbers that you forecast into the business. And obviously the business is always challenging you to do more, right? So
absolutely.
How do you get more than that?
But more isn't always more, is it? Because you can focus on putting more in the top of funnel and it being the wrong stuff as a result of that push for more sometimes.
Yeah, it's about I think it's been really interesting, because I think a year ago you would have focused a lot on the quality in terms of the output. But I think what the pandemic's done has really shifted that, because you haven't had so much confidence in deals, and some of that is like, people changing projects, budgets being pulled, them not wanting to go forward with it, change of scenarios, and that's been really interesting for us. Is that actually, to your point, it's not just about what we're putting in there; it's actually what confidence have we got that actually it's going to actually complete and close. And the way that we work on that is actually being a little bit more open with the guys and saying, look, let's just go with deals that you've got 90% confidence on.
Yeah.
The ones that we think will happen or get pushed for whatever reason, let's put those away.
Yeah.
not say they're going to be delivered, and focus on the ones that you're 90% confident on. So that's how we've really approached it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And one of the things you touched on was having that healthy balance between, big, small, medium opportunities in the pipeline. What sort of ratios do you look for where you're looking at a healthy pipeline? Because of course you don't want 10 big ones. I'm using probably different numbers, but 10 big ones there and 2 small ones, because the big ones make or break you equally. I guess you don't want it all small and none of those whales coming through.
Yeah, no, and it's a really good point. You probably want, like, the way that we look at it is like a 70-30 mix.
Yeah.
Where you want 30% of your pipeline to be your high value, your high tickets, and then the rest of it is like run rate kind of stuff that that's going to come through. Probably the velocity and the pace of that sales cycle is a bit quicker than the wows and the bigger tickets. Like for us, for example, the more complex businesses with different shareholder structures, they probably take, at least an 8 to 12 week cycle. When you're borrowing £500,000 to £1 million, versus someone that's taken maybe 50 to 100k that could be pretty quick and around pretty quick. So I would say it works different for different organizations. But one of the things I would say is that if you're not looking at your pipeline mix, do that, because it will really help you, rather than all of your monthly or quarterly number, to your point, relying on 1 or 2 deals. You can actually do it, and it's a really good way to coach and manage people in terms of their mix of pipeline.
And one of the mantras around pipeline management is that your pipeline is only as good as the people putting putting the data into the CRM, right? So it's very easy for me to say something's 90% by entering something in when it's not. How do you manage that with your team? How do you ensure that you've got data integrity around those opportunities?
Yeah, so for me, it's really important. There's a couple of things that are really important. One, I think, are you speaking to the decision maker? Or if you're not, do you understand the decision process? So what I mean by that is, what is the process for sign off? So if you take Air, for example, Owen's the MD, you may not be involved in those conversations, but at some point it's got to come to you to get signed off. So how do you manage that? And when you're speaking to your account execs or your reps, are they really clear on who makes the decisions? Then what kind of budgets? Has the budget's already been assigned to this, or do we need to get sign off from the FD or CFO? And it's really getting into the granular bits of what are the bits that you really want to know to have confidence yourself and leading that business, as a sales manager, as a VP and things like that. So for me, I get very involved in the high value like deals, where every week we review our high value deals and we go through what are the barriers, what are the red flags, what's going to stop this deal, and then how do we know that we're doing everything we can. And we also we use Salesforce, so we have a next step process. Are we clear on what the next step is? What is happening with that client that we've got real confidence that deal is going to go through?
Okay. And how regularly are you looking at it? Because I'm guessing you've got people that look at it, that report into you as well, probably more regularly or more at a more granular level. But for you yourself, how regularly do you look at it?
So forecasting wise, we have a weekly forecast call. So we know what we're doing on a weekly, monthly basis, and we forecast for the month and the quarter. So we have a run rate and what we want to do there. In terms of the big deals, we do a monthly deal review. So all of the big deals, like I said, probably take a little longer in terms of sales cycle. Every month, my managers will go through those big deals, and we also use Salesforce in a way where obviously you can use chatter and things like that. So I'm able to make notes on things, Owen, where I might say, we've not updated this, you know, in the last week. What's going on with it? It's passed behind and stuff like that.
So I think this is a really interesting topic, and I'm keen to understand how this process has changed in the last 12 months, and whether, because of the pandemic, you've now got more accurate forecasting because you're offering a different product set, aren't you? Or less accurate forecasting because there are now, I guess, more moving parts and there's more unpredictability. So is it harder or easier to forecast out a quarter ahead now for you?
I think forecasting is always hard, right? It's never easy. And I think one of the big things that I learned, you know, that's from just being in sales is, you know, there are things that change all the time. You know, the compelling event changes, or especially as you get towards the end of that deal. Yeah, there's things that just change, right? The budget gets pulled, or the project's pushed, and stuff that you can't really, you know, predict. Yeah. And I think for us, it's more actually, we've changed, rather than focusing on outcome, we've focused on inputs, because I think the outcome has shifted a little bit. It's really hard for us to you know, predict that someone's going to pull that budget, or you know, that actually, you know, Brexit changes that for them because they're exporting and things like that. So what we've really focused on is the activity piece, and that's really like top of the funnel pipeline development, Owen, growing our pipelines. And what we think about is that when we come out of that, how do we accelerate? How do we have we got enough pipeline? And you know, one of the lovely things working with you guys, and this isn't a plug, by the way, just generally it's really,
all right if it is, don't worry.
No, but we've worked with Air in two kind of fashions over the last year. One was, how did Air help us during the crisis? And that was like, we needed more resource. Our borrowers were, you know, heavily impacted by the restrictions. So we had more collections calls coming in, you know, people needed to go on to payment plans, and we didn't have the right levels of support to do that. And we had to do that really quickly, change our operation process. And actually working with someone like Air was just like, Owen, can you help me? Like, I need you to take, you know, some inbound traffic for us. And you did a fantastic job. And now we've obviously developed that relationship, and we've now come out of that a little bit, and I would probably say that we're in a stabilization phase where you're now really helping us with pipeline growth. And for us, you're speaking to small businesses, helping them, you know, think about the funding options that they have. So our focus is on productivity and activity. So you know, how many meetings someone's doing, how many appointments they've got. Very much around top of the funnel kind of metric, which it wasn't like that a year ago. I'd give someone a quota. I'd be like, here's your quota, here's your number, go and hit it. Yeah,
it's almost become okay again to look at numbers and KPIs and metrics a bit more transparently and openly, and talk about the fact that, you know, times are tough, we have to do this. And I think sales reps in particular have become more accepting of the fact that, look, it is tough, so we have got to narrow in a little bit on how we're measuring things at a transactional level.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's also been helpful from a coaching and development point of view, right? Because when you look at those kind of KPIs, you're back into call coaching, quality of conversation, and how you deliver value for your customers.
Yeah, agreed. So obviously we've touched on one way that you feel the top of funnel, which is Air, and that's great, but that's not necessarily what we want to focus on today. What are the other channels that you use, or what are the other channels that are really successful for you for putting opportunities in your pipeline?
So we're very driven from a marketing perspective. So we do across all digital and physical channels. So we send out direct mail. Obviously we use email for prospecting. We're obviously on a majority of digital, whether it be, you know, keyword ads, PPC. So we do a lot of that, and we do an enormous amount of testing on our messaging, Owen, to try and develop the right messaging that would create calls to action and drive leads into the top of the funnel. What we've definitely found with the Civils product is that obviously it's a really compelling product for businesses. So we've basically focused on segments that we believe will benefit from having a cash input. So, you know, retail hospitality, when you're not trading and your revenues are declining, you probably need some cash. So we focused on where we can have impact within that community. But we do a load of marketing to drive it in, and we've actually found I don't think this is going to come as any surprise. Obviously, the digital channels have performed really well.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because you, a few years ago, you were kind of renowned as an organisation for your letters. Everyone got Funding Circle letters. Like you hit your second birthday as a business, and there was your Funding Circle letter on the doorstep. That I'm guessing that has changed a fair bit in the last year because there are less offices open, less businesses open. I would guess that gets sat in a post box for a lot longer. I don't know. Have you seen much change with that channel?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, as you just said there, people have worked more remotely, so they haven't been as in the office as much. We still obviously do a lot of direct mail, and we still believe in a combination of physical and digital, to get a better response rate. What we have seen is that we still are getting a response. So for the last 10 years, Owen, one of the big things that I've learned being at Funding Circle is the analysis that they do around data. And we use a lot of data to profile customers where we can predict response rates, potential loan sizes, what we call loan sizes. So if you think about a normal business, what that contract value might be. And we use the data all the time to refine that. So we're not just spending our dollars in an environment where we're just spraying. We're quite targeted in terms of what we're doing. What we've also seen is the shift from physical to virtual events. So which has been really interesting for us. So we would do quite a lot of road shows and work with our partners and things like that. And obviously when COVID struck, that was all and gone. And actually with things like Zoom and stuff like that, what we've really been able to do is actually create virtual events where actually we've increased our participation. So we've roughly get around about 50 people to our sort of road shows. So think accountants and things like that. But actually on our virtual events with the right content and the right sort of things that people want to engage with, we've actually 10x that.
Wow.
So we're getting roughly around 500 for every event that we do, which is again been a really good way of generating leads and things for us to follow up on.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? I mean, the behavior around event attendance is so changed, and I think you've got to maximize it, but you have to change the way you do events as well.
Yeah, I think also the other thing that we noticed was the profile of people that were coming to the events. Sometimes we'd find it really hard to get what we would call C-suite to the event. So whether that be a partner in an accountant's firm, or an MD like yourself, you're generally quite busy, right? And those people tend to say, haven't got time to go to that event. Whereas now, because they do have a bit more time and it is in a remote environment, we have definitely seen more C-suite engagement on a virtual event.
It's a much smaller decision. Do I click a button, log on to this event for half an hour, whatever it is, sat from the comfort of my own home or home office or whatever it might be? Or do I get in a car, get on a train, get on a plane, go physically and give up a day or a night or a day and night to go to this event? And suddenly the value exchange has, what you're asking for is so much less, and therefore it's easier for people to say yes. And I think capitalizing on that is a really, really good strategy at the moment, which is why more and more webinars are being run, more and more of this sort of stuff is going on, because it's just easier to consume now.
Exactly. And you can have people, you can gate that content, right, where you send out the webinar and you ask people to register, or there's a really good company called Drift, for those that don't know, that do an automated version where they've got some chatbots and stuff like that they use. So it's how do you use that technology to, again, to your point, generate leads and things for your sales teams to call.
I'm just going to take you back 5 minutes. You talked about your data team and how much work goes into getting data right. I think data is quite often one of the most underestimated aspects of any outreach campaign. For me, it's probably the most important. Like an average salesperson with good data can do wonders. A really good salespeople targeting the wrong people can do nothing. Give me your thoughts around that argument around quantity of activity in a sales process with the right data, because I believe that we should give data to salespeople, and these are the people that you should be targeting, because there are smarter people with data than salespeople, and they're typically data people, research people, sales leaders who understand the target market. That should be a job that's done at that level and then given to a sales team who can no doubt add value to it in the process, but their focus should then be on, I know these are the right kind of people, it's quantity of activity and of course quality of activity, but not having to research research and spend hours and hours thinking about who to call. I think there's a HubSpot piece of data that says that the average salesperson uses an hour and a half a day of procrastination. What shall I do next? So we eliminate that by giving them the right target market in the right place. Just give me some commentary around that. You must see the real benefits of that with the way that you guys work.
So one of the things that I've been managing sales now for too long, Owen. But one of the things that you used to do, right, when you didn't have all these data points, whether it be CRM or whatever product you're using, is you would go and speak to the salespeople, or you'd give someone a load of prospects. To your point, and you'd just say, Sean, go and work those leads, right? Here's your value prop. Here's the problem we're solving. Go and call them. Yeah. But actually, the inefficiencies on that were just massive, because you just had to do research. To your point, actually, it was the wrong contact. The data wasn't very good in terms of quality. But actually, now what you can do is you can run a campaign and actually see the impact and the effectiveness of that campaign, and actually say, okay, well, what worked really well? What did that customer look like? You can start to drill down to your point about segmentation, about like employee size or turnover and things like that. And actually, really what you want to do is get your sales reps pitching your product, right? That's what you really want to do, not spending time doing all of that research. And I think the data has allowed me, and I certainly, one of the things that I've taken from using data is not jumping into a decision. Yeah. So, you can run a campaign and you go, oh my God, that campaign was brilliant. But actually, when you look at the data, you're like, actually, we can make that even better. If we didn't call that 20, 30%, we could do that. And one of the things that we've done at Funding Circle is, obviously, when people are applying for a loan, and especially at the moment, it's really important they get a quick decision. Yeah. But actually, there's not every business that we can help, right? And whilst we would love to do that, there are some obviously eligibility criteria and some credit criteria. But actually what we did is we started to remove some of that. So we were able to give a better experience to the borrower by saying yes or no quicker. Yeah. But actually, for our sales reps, they were only working with the ones that we believed that we could sincerely help. And that's, our offer to accept rate is over 80%. So using data has really helped that. But yeah, I'm on your train of thought. How do you get, and it's hard when you're growing, because I think bigger organizations have, like a sales ops kind of, where sales ops are constantly reviewing segmentation and data, and, they bring you the campaigns. What I would say for anyone that's new, get into it. Honestly, just get into it, and for our environment, working mainly on an inside sales telephony base, times a day that you call, contact rate and all of that, the efficiencies you can gain. And I just think from a morale perspective as well, the morale benefits you get from giving people data is phenomenal.
Yeah, and I think it's so easy to make assumptions. So that campaign performed really well, but it did because we generated more leads, but did they convert? And quite often we see those two things don't go hand in hand. More leads doesn't always mean more conversions. And looking at each data point in isolation is dangerous. Looking at a whole picture together and taking the time to put it together is the most powerful thing that you can do. And I think, we also need to avoid assumptions. Back to the time of day point, we learned that, there's a really good time of the week on a Monday morning on our outreach for some of our clients recently. But we've been putting training on Monday morning because we've written it off thinking, well, that's one of those times of the week where it just isn't good to get hold of people. But the data told us otherwise. So we listened to the data, and I dread to think how long we've been making that assumption for and how many opportunities we may have missed as a result of that. So it's really interesting to hear that. Let's talk about some points of failure. One of the things that I think is really powerful for people to listen to is where successful people running big sales operations like you have gone wrong, because they can learn from that. So give me something that people can learn from. What have you tried in the last 12 months that hasn't worked?
Yeah, fucked up quite a lot. So we've got a lot here. I guess.
Don't worry, this isn't a one-to-one. So we have. There's no disciplinary off the back of this. No performance management criteria. You're all right.
Thanks. You've made me feel safer. Thank you. But I guess the main thing I've seen is obviously we went into a bit of crisis management. Yeah. And I think that was similar for a lot of people, and we needed to react really quickly. to how the market was changing and our customer needs and what they needed from us. One of the things that we made a mistake on was being too purist. And what I mean by that is you always want it to work, don't you? You want the process to be good, you want the experience to be good, and you put the controls in place to hopefully deliver that.
Yeah.
The trouble that I learned, that I found with, by doing that, actually some things you just needed to get on with. And they were a bit messy, right? And actually, so there were some things early on where we put some processes in, and actually all we did was create a worse experience.
Yeah.
And when I removed those, actually it went in. To give you an example, when we went into it, we had to change some of our relationships with, you know, our partners.
Yeah.
So before it was really easy for them to refer a lead, whereas now we were saying, well, you know, we've got to consider this, and you've got to go through these processes.
Yeah.
And actually our lead volume just went like that.
Yeah.
And as soon as we switched it off and just said, look, just call us, we'll
just do it again.
We'll help your customer.
Yeah.
And we've slowly moved back to building it back into a really robust process. But what I learned really quickly was if you're trialing stuff, if it's messy at first, it's fine. Just work it out.
They say fail fast, don't they? Fail fast. And I think this is a debate that I have with people a lot, because I'm on the same side of the fence. You get it done, fail fast, come up with an idea, try it, learn as you go. And I think too many people sit and think and procrastinate, and they miss the opportunity, or they just never get started with it, and then it's gone entirely.
Yeah. And then the other failing that I did is that obviously when your revenues decline, you tend to pull back on stuff. So you tend to pull back on incentives and spend and things like that. And I think some businesses, you need to make that decision. But when it first hit, we used to do a lot of things around spiffs, Owen, around, you know, different things, KPI targets and stuff like that, where they could achieve, you know, prizes and things like that. But actually we pulled back from that. And actually a lot of the things that would drive some of the behaviors and performance that you want, and you don't want to rely on them, but actually spiffs are really powerful. And we fouled on that really early on, where actually giving back was really important.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it took us 2 or 3 months to get back
to work it out, but it does. But the important thing is you do. Look, we're as sales leaders, we're imperfect, just like everybody else. And I think there's a fair amount of, you build the right to have resilience within a team. And one of the things that we've learned, I think, in the last 12 months more than any, is that the investment that we made in people, culture, reward, progression, all those things that we think will come back and reward us in the long term as employees, as salespeople, they paid off in the last 12 months, because companies started or employees started to value that so much more. I'm in a stable place. They look after me. They do the right thing. They give me a comfortable culture. I'm not going to jump from here, because right now that is really valuable. And I think that you kind of earn the right to get it wrong by doing good things in the years prior. Those organizations that the pandemic hit and suddenly they went, right, we've got to focus on culture. We've got to make this a really nice place to be. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. It was too late. People were gone at that point. It was too late. And I think that, you know, certainly as an employer of lots of salespeople, we saw the benefits of being focused on people for a long time there, because the employee loyalty in hard times just went up and up and up and up. They saw the company had, you know, struggling for revenues for a couple of months there, and they jumped in and went, what can we do? How can we help? And you could see the genuine, authentic care about the organization and its well-being and its success. And I think that was earned not on that day, but by all the things that happened a long time before that. So I'm sure that your sales team will forgive you for that, and will be grateful for that, the fact you changed your mind at the same time.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I wouldn't say has been a failure, but definitely a learning as we've, you know, shifted to more of a remote kind of place. And actually, you know, when you think about like longer term, how are you going to get back to a physical environment? There's going to be a re-engagement process at the other end. One of the things that I think has been really interesting is learning at what points do you communicate, how often do you communicate, what's the cadence of that, how do you, to your point, how do you keep that, you know, everyone understanding very clearly what the strategy is, what the expectations are, and actually over this last 9 months, we probably communicated a lot more than we did previously. and actually that's been really, really good. Like we used to do probably bi-weekly, monthly all hands. Actually they're happening twice a week now with the whole company. Like 400 people are on these, listening to the MD, really understanding what's going on. And I think that's been really helpful to help people really get a real sense of, okay, I know what my role is here. I know how I have impact on the customers, on the shareholders. And actually, it's been really, really good. I guess when we go back to a physical environment, it's, okay, do we keep that cadence? Or as the market shifts again, how do you change that?
And will you ever get back to a true 100% physical environment? And if you've always got then that blend hybrid, then you've got to think differently again, haven't you? Because you've now got two different scenarios rather than everyone in or everyone out. Exactly.
And you may have some calls where people are in the room and some people are Zooming or video calling in. So it's going to be a really interesting time, I think.
Two final questions for me. One is, you've mentioned BANT and you've mentioned MEDDIC in this process. What are there other sales methodologies that are on your radar, things that you use at Funding Circle to success that people should be looking out for?
Do you know, this is just a personal view. I think you've got to use what works for you. And a lot of that is based on sales cycle as well, right? So if you're in a transactional environment, which we are at times, you probably don't need to go down the route of MEDDIC, for example. Whereas if you're in an enterprise sale, you definitely probably do need to do that. So I guess you need to work out what's right for you. And for me personally, it's more around sales cycle. I think the big thing, like I said, there's a couple of key things that I look at, which is necessarily sales methodology, but what's the reason this company's doing this? What's the compelling event, right? The other thing that I ask salespeople a lot is, why will Owen not do this? And normally it's apathy. It's like, I just don't want to do change. There's not enough there. So how do you create that? And then, you start to think about where they are in the buy-in cycle. Are we up against any competitors? Who are our competitors? So I think it's different for different people, but you've definitely got to have a framework to give a salesperson a real good understanding of how you do that. The other thing that I think helps a lot, Owen, is you talked about research and data. Is how do you give them that data? So we do a lot of stuff around, Companies House or, working with people like Experian. So all of that data is given to the rep. So they've got a really good understanding before they even call the client of, okay, this company's profitable, I can see they've got 10 employees, and just generally a bit of information to help that. But sales methodologies, I think whatever works for you. But I think transactionally for me, BANT's always been a pretty good one in terms of budget, authority, need, and timeline.
It works. But it's funny, isn't it? Again, it's one of those things that's gone out of fashion. It's almost not cool to talk about making lots of sales calls and bank qualification, but they've hung around for a long time because they work in the right environment. They're very powerful.
Exactly.
Okay, final question for you. Let's go back to Sean at 21 years old. Don't know how many years ago that was, 5 or 6, I'd imagine. What do you wish you'd have known then about sales that you know now? So if you could pass that back to your 21-year-old self and say, hey, be aware of this. This is something to be aware of. What are the tips you'd give yourself?
One, I would think about onboarding people. How do you get someone to become a sales expert really quickly? How do you accelerate that process? I think people talk about attrition and retention, and that's so important, right? It's so important. But actually, what is the ramp time? How do you onboard someone to your company? Get them involved in the culture, the behaviors, and the values. But then, how do you make sure that they're successful quicker in 3 months or 6 months rather than 12 months? And I think that's something I've definitely learned over my, if I was 21 years old, I'd be like, Sean, focus on the onboarding. When you get good talent, how do you get them ramped quickly? I'd also probably give myself, I'd overhire. I think there's a tendency sometimes, especially when you're scaling, to think, actually, do I really need this salesperson right now? I could cope. I could put more pressure on Sean or whatever. But actually, if you actually looked at the ramp time of a rep and actually then put in their bookings and their pipeline activity, Owen, you'd be like, just give it, put more in. So I've definitely learned about onboarding, ramp times, hire ahead of time, and ultimately, whatever anyone says to me, it's a people business. The tech stacks are amazing, and you should use technology and you should embrace that. But it's a people business, and how do you attract the right talent, nurture the right talent, and hopefully they go on to be successful for you, but even beyond that they go on to be successful for themselves.
Yeah, and that's opening a whole tech versus people. What's more important? I see that argument a lot. That's another conversation for another day, Sean, isn't it? But it is a very interesting one, I have to say. That's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for joining me today. Sean, if people want to know a bit more about Funding Circle, if they want to access some money as a business owner and boost their growth or help on their journey, where do they go? What do they do?
Yeah, so we have a really quick and easy online process. So if you go to fundingcircle.co.uk, you can get started straight away. You can apply for a loan. We ask about 10 questions. You need to provide some financials and bank statements, which are pretty straightforward. And normally we give a decision within 48 hours. So it's as simple as that. And as I said, been very fortunate, Owen, to be able to help during the pandemic with businesses that have been heavily impacted. And I truly hope, with the vaccine in sight now, that we continue to do that, and lots of businesses come out the other side, and we prosper in 2021 towards the back end.
Absolutely. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me, and I feel like I could keep asking you questions for at least another couple of hours, and there'd just be knowledge and experience coming out, and I'm sure that we'd love to do that again with you at some point. But for now, thank you ever so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
No worries, my pleasure. Cheers, Owen.
Thanks.